The conflict in Myanmar has been ongoing since 1948, the year the country, then known as Burma, gained independence from the United Kingdom. The conflict has largely been ethnic-based, with several ethnic armed groups fighting Myanmar's armed forces, the Tatmadaw for self-determination. The Rohingya insurgents have been fighting against local government forces and other insurgent groups in northern Rakhine State since 1948, with ongoing religious violence between the predominantly Muslim Rohingyas and the Buddhist Rakhines fueling the conflict. In February 2021, a military coup d'etat took place, overthrowing the democratically elected government. This event has led to a significant escalation in violence and instability, with the military carrying out a brutal nationwide crackdown on millions of people opposed to its rule. The junta's mismanagement of the country's economy since the coup has heightened the humanitarian crisis. The main forces involved in the conflict are the Myanmar military, known as the Tatmadaw, and various ethnic armed organizations. The National Unity Government, formed in response to the coup, is also a significant actor. The Tatmadaw is a well-trained and well-equipped force which has been continuously battling various insurgencies since World War II. Impact on civilians and the region. The conflict has resulted in recurring, protracted, and new displacement, with thousands of refugees fleeing into neighboring countries and over 1.95 million people currently displaced within Myanmar. The junta has blocked desperately needed humanitarian aid from reaching millions of displaced people. The conflicts in Myanmar have displaced nearly 1 million people internally since the coup, with an additional 70,000 fleeing to neighboring countries. The military has carried out mass killings, arbitrary arrests, torture, sexual violence, and other abuses that amount to crimes against humanity. The junta's ineptitude and mismanagement of the country's economy since the coup has heightened the humanitarian crisis. The Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, ACLED, estimated that as of July 29, 2022, around 23,521 people in total had been killed in the violence following the 2021 coup. However, it's important to note that these figures include both combatants and civilians, and the data does not provide a breakdown between the two. As for the civilian casualties, a study found that at least 6,337 civilians were reported as killed and 2,614 as wounded for political reasons in Myanmar. Another report by the Peace Research Institute Oslo found that the Myanmar military, police and affiliated militia were responsible for over 3,000 reported civilian deaths. In the same 20-month period, anti-coup resistance groups killed over 2,000 civilians, and unspecified perpetrators killed at least 1,000 civilians. Regarding the casualties among the military and anti-coup forces, it's estimated that at least 21,000 service members have been lost through casualties, desertion and defection since the coup. The Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, AAPP, reported that junta forces killed nearly 3,000 civilians between February 1, 2021 and December 31, 2022. However, it's unclear how many military personnel were killed during this period. It is important to note that these figures are estimates, and the actual numbers could be higher due to underreporting and the difficulty of verifying information in conflict zones. Future outlook. The conflict in Myanmar is deeply rooted in the country's history and socio-political dynamics, making it challenging to predict a definitive future outlook. The ongoing violence and political instability have led to a humanitarian crisis, with thousands of civilians fleeing into neighboring countries. The opposition has prevented the military from consolidating control over the country, pressuring countries that provide military supplies to the junta and sanctioning Myanmar's oil and gas revenues. Potential solutions. Several potential pathways to conflict resolution have been suggested, including ceasefire negotiations, peace talks, and other diplomatic efforts. Ceasefire negotiations. The Nationwide Ceasefire Agreement, NCA, seeks to achieve a negotiated settlement between the government of Myanmar and non-state ethnic armed organizations. However, the NCA has faced challenges, including demands for amendments in the final text, ongoing skirmishes, and the issue of which groups might be excluded from the agreement. Peace talks. China has brokered peace talks with representatives of an alliance of ethnic minority armed groups against which the Myanmar military is engaged in conflict. These talks aim to de-escalate the fighting in the northeast region of Myanmar. Diplomatic efforts. International organizations have been unable to find a diplomatic solution in Myanmar so far. The UN has called for immediate international action to have a significant impact on the rapidly evolving situation in Myanmar. The military lacks a strategic plan to end the conflict in the country and move the nation forward regionally and globally. Challenges. The peace process in Myanmar faces significant challenges. The conflict resource economy, which is tied to the ongoing armed conflict within the country, is a major issue. Questions of who has what ownership rights over what resources and how these resources can be more equitably distributed are central to the conflict. Moreover, the peace process needs a fresh start, learning from the past and seeking to resolve underlying political disparities while addressing deep-rooted problems. In conclusion, while there are potential pathways to conflict resolution in Myanmar, the complexity of the situation and the deep-rooted issues at play make it a challenging process. It will require concerted international effort, political will, and the commitment to addressing the underlying causes of the conflict to achieve a lasting peace. Recommendations for travelers and commercial entities. The U.S. Department of State advises against travel to Myanmar due to civil unrest and armed conflict. Conflict-affected areas are of greatest concern, particularly areas of Shan, Chin, and Kachin states. Travelers should avoid travel to these areas. For businesses and individuals operating in Myanmar, the U.S. Department of State has identified specific entities and sectors of greatest concern within Myanmar, including state-owned enterprises, gems and precious metals, real estate and construction projects, and arms, military equipment and related activity. These entities and sectors have been identified as primary industries, providing economic resources to the military regime. Businesses and individuals should consider laws and regulations when engaging in business activities or transactions in or involving Myanmar.